Sanders and Scott Jennings, as we said, with President George W. Bush, formerly. All right, so let me start with you, James. The White House put out a statement saying, look, here's what we've done. Right, background checks have been improved. They're not perfect, but they've been improved. Gun show loophole not closed. They're not talking about that, but they're talking about how they've been improved. Bump stocks are going to be banned. They're moving towards that. But yet the gun show loophole, as I said, is still open. We have a long way to go on a lot of things. The raising the age hasn't happened. Are these common sense things or not?
Absolutely. And from a law enforcement professional and a conservative and a gun owner and, you know, somebody who was an Army vet, I appreciate what these students have done with this movement. I think it has definitely moved legislation forward. I think these things are going to be helpful. They're definitely low-hanging fruit. 97% of the country believes that there should be universal background checks. How that hasn't been done before is beyond me. 11 states, Aaron, only 11 require legal gun owners who have weapons lost or stolen to report them, which means 39 states you could have an arsenal, and if you lose that arsenal, the weapons are stolen or you lose them, you don't report them. And it makes no sense. I mean, from my position as a former law enforcement professional, we want officers to be safe. We want people to be safe. That doesn't mean disarming people. We are Second Amendment supporters, but we understand that the Second Amendment was written in 1791, and here we are in 2018, and we have to adapt and adjust.
All right, in this you agree, Scott?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're a gun owner, and you, I would imagine, agree with everything he just said?
Yes, there are a number of things that can be done that absolutely do not trample on people's rights or property. And raising the age is a simple one. It would have prevented this guy from buying a weapon in Florida. Fixing the background check system would have probably prevented this guy from buying a weapon in Florida. I think there's also human processes that we have to look at here. There have been failures. The Sheriff's Department failed. The FBI, in this case in Florida, failed. I go back to the shooting in Texas at the church. That guy had been discharged from the Air Force and should have been on the no-buy registry. They forgot. That was a human failure. All of these things can be fixed and dealt with, and not a one of them would trample on anyone's gun rights at all.
Agreed.
And yet, Simone, it doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen. I mean, I think people have valid points to make about the NRA, particularly in the gun lobby, and the influence that they have over lawmakers, or that lawmakers or potential lawmakers, candidates, are scared if they come out with a position that is what the NRA would consider against them, that the NRA will, their gun lobby will spend substantial amounts of funds against that candidate and support their opponent. So, look, I think sometimes this does not happen because folks just truly believe it cannot be done and they're scared of the NRA, but I look to Florida. People said time and time again that you would never see change in Florida. But you know what? These kids, these young people, they didn't just march on Washington. They marched on their state capitol. They called up their elected officials, their state legislators, and they demanded that something happen. And they came together in Florida, and they raised the age. And so I believe that change can come, change can happen. Folks just have to stop being scared.
Yeah, you know what's interesting, though, Mark, is, you know, it's incredible that change can be done, and it's important. And I think we had Congressman Mast on, and you have Scott here, and you have James here, who are saying they support Second Amendment, they're gun owners in law enforcement, and they support all these things. And yet when you're saying, okay, only in 11 states do you even have to announce when your guns are stolen, you know, and you can probably come up with 10 more things like that.
Easily.
It doesn't mean that you don't have to start somewhere.
Right.
But it is pretty terrifying, if you look at it that way, how bad things got.
Well, things are terrible right now, and I have to say that it's coming from both sides. And I'm not saying that both sides don't have a point that they're trying to make. But what we're seeing is, you know, of course, we're talking about Scott and talking about James here. The bottom line is they're part of the 97% of America. And quite frankly, they're probably 98, 99% of gun owners, of Americans who are lawful gun owners who believe that there needs to be some regulations put into place. What's interesting, though, is what's happening in Congress is that the National Rifle Association has become so powerful and that they put so much money into the system that they've had this lock on it. I would argue, though, that these kids, only because they seem to have lasting power, might be breaking that lock that the NRA has on Congress.
Yeah, and you know what, April, was an interesting thing. I saw a CNBC column today that was going through the funding from the NRA. And they looked at Marco Rubio specifically, right, because people have been accusing him of being bought off. And they looked at all of his funding, and 3% of it comes from the NRA. So, in a sense, it's the perception of the NRA by lawmakers and the president almost seems to be bigger than the reality, even when it comes to money.
I don't know if it's perception. I know the money, you say it's only 3%.
Well, that was just Marco Rubio.
Right, for Marco Rubio. But the cachet that the NRA has, they have touched a large portion of the Republican Party. And even if the president says, I don't want this, they have enough power to sway members of the Republican Party to go their way. The question is, who is the president listening to? The masses that are out there marching today or the NRA? That's the big question. And when you say 97% who are supporting background checks, you have to wonder why. Why? It's not the fact that the majority is supporting it, only 3%. It's the NRA, the National Rifle Association.
Tim?
You know, today was a very, very important moment. It's hard to predict inflection points in our politics, but can any of us really remember the last time that a group of high school students started a movement? Dr. King enlisted young people in Birmingham, and they together created an inflection point in the history of the civil rights movement. But it was Dr. King and his group that pulled them together. But in this case, it was the kids themselves. And they're not part of any political party. They're too young to be true activists. All they are kids who decided not to be victims. That's a big deal.
James, I just want to get you in here, though, on this. Why do you think it is that so many people, not just people who don't have guns, but people who have guns, gun owners, people who know a lot about guns, people who are trained in using them, people who may have or know how to use assault-style weapons, most of those people also support gun control, reasonable gun reform, right? You're not going to say, oh my gosh, because you want to raise the age, you know, you're going to prevent some kind of a revolution and uprising against our government. But yet that narrative seems to win.
It is the fear of the slippery slope. And to go back to why only 11 states require you to report a lost or stolen weapon, people fear that means you'll have a national gun registry. Now, I argue with a lot of my conservative friends all the time because they say, we need AR-15s, we need weapons that can combat potentially a tyrannical government. And I look at them and say, but the government has nukes. You're going to lose that one. That's not the argument to make. What we need to do is do some of the things that have just happened. We need to keep talking. Now, I was there today on the ground with April and others in D.C. It was for me to stand there on the mall where women's suffrages rights began, where the civil rights movement began, even as the son of a Vietnam vet, where the anti-war protests began, and to see that and be part of that, and to know that people come there to get change was fulfilling. But we can't stay intrinsically in our camps. And some of the things, and of course it starts at the top, unfortunately, the coarse language, the calling people names, and the demonizing on both sides, it makes people move to opposite ends.
Well, let's hope that today is a moment that changes, because you have so many people who can agree. Yeah. And hopefully we'll start to see that, the one place where nobody seems to agree or do anything. We all know where that is. Next, a Columbine massacre survivor now